Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the Temecula Public Traffic Safety Commission to order. First off, could we have the flag salute by Commissioner Maddox, please?
Yes, please rise. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we get the roll, please?
Yes. Ackerman?
Here.
Carter?
Here?
Maddox?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Sullivan?
Here.
Okay, I understand we have one public comment.
Yes. Jessica Christopher?
Okay, I'm going to read this first on your way up, Jessica. So, a total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the commission on matters not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. There's a clock right up there. You'll see it, and please follow that. Public comments may be made in person at the meeting or by submitting a speaker card to the commission secretary or by submitting an email to be read aloud into the record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted to the Public Traffic Safety Commission at temecula.gov. Speaker cards for in-person comments will be called in order received by the commission secretary, and then if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments. All public participation is governed by the council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by resolution number 2021-54. Our public comment?
Jessica Christopher?
Good evening.
Good evening. I live on Avenida Barca. I live in the house that Pat Birdsall used to live in. And that is between San Pasqual and Via Monterey on Avenida Barca. And on Avenida Barca, I would like to have each and every one of you come on out and visit between 2:45 and 3:30. I'd like to bring your wives and your kids, and I want them to try and cross that street while the schools are getting out, because Avenida Barca is a blind hill and a curve at the same time. And I walk on that road in the mornings, and any given day, a car's coming over that hill and then they have to swerve because there's no white lines on either side of that road. The track kids from Margarita run on that road. I'm simply asking for some paint on either side of the road, because it's scary to have a car swerve because, oh my God, they thought they had this much room when really they should only have this much room. So if you guys could come out, I'd really appreciate it. I am the one that keeps calling Riverside County or the sheriffs and saying, hey, non-emergency line, please stop the parents from parking on that street. And they're still, today, there was another one still parking, despite the fact that I called in the city and said, hey, have them trim the trees so they can see the no parking signs. There's a no parking signs all the way, and they still park there. I have almost been hit 3 times at that corner in the 9 years that I've lived there. That's all I got. Look, I'm under 3 minutes. And it was the excitement of your day.
Actually, it was.
May I say something?
Thank you.
Yes, Jessica, I just wanted to advise you that we can't handle this tonight because of state regulations. It's not on our agenda, but
I need you to know that because I need to tell Stu that I've been here. And then I'm going to tell Stu again that we need lines.
right, and I'm sure Ron will pass it on to Pat Thomas as well, so it does get on the agenda, so please watch for it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Okay, any more public comments?
Nope.
Okay, consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion on these items unless members of the commission request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the commission on items that appear on the consent calendar. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be made in person in a meeting, submitting a speaker card, commission secretary, by submitting an email to be read aloud in the record at the meeting. Email comments must be submitted by Public Traffic Safety Commission at temecula.gov. Speaker cards and in-person comments will be called in order to received by the commission secretary, and then, if time remains, email comments will be read. Email comments on all other matters must be received prior to the time the item is called for public comments. All public participation is governed by council policy regarding public participation at meetings adopted by Resolution 2021-54. The only item that we have under the consent calendar is to approve the minutes of January 26, 2023.
So moved.
Did I get a second?
I'll second.
Have a
Ackerman,
Roll call vote.
Aye.
Carter,
aye?
Maddox,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Sullivan.
Aye.
Okay. Now, for the business of the evening, we have a budget engagement session. Public Traffic Safety Commission to file and receive, or receive and file, whichever way you want to do it. I guess we'll receive it and then file it.
Sure.
All right, good evening. My name is Jennifer Hennessy. I'm the Director of Finance, and I'm here tonight with two of my colleagues that are out in the audience. I've got Ward Comers, our Assistant Finance Director, and Paula Majors, our Finance Manager. And we are here tonight to do what we call the budget engagement session. So I think most of you have been through this before. But what we are intending to do tonight is to give you an update on our current budget, where it stands, as well as our capital improvement program budget, and then go over a few key policies that are used when incorporating and developing the budget, and then most importantly, gain feedback from you all, as well as from your constituents on what you're hearing about community priorities and whether or not you believe that the budget is in alignment with community priorities. So with that, I'll jump into the presentation. Let's see. Well, I kind of just said what we were going to do, so cover that slide. So at the end of the presentation, I will ask these discussion questions. So I wanted to give them to you up front so you can be thinking of them as we go through the presentation. But basically what we're here to gather is, as a commissioner, do you feel that the city's investment of financial resources are in line with the community's priorities? And then if so, what are some key programs or projects that you believe are most beneficial to our community? And then if not, how could the city better align its resources with the community priorities? So our budget process begins in January of each year when we review the current year's budget. We look at the detailed revenue trends, we look at the overall economy and see where things are trending, and we update our 5-year financial projections. And then in February, we present the mid-year budget to the City Council, and then we also kick off the next fiscal year's annual operating budget and capital improvement program budget, and we did both of these last week. And then also in February, and it carries over into March, are the various commission meetings to do the budget engagement sessions that we're doing tonight. We meet with all of the boards and commissions and go through this same presentation, and then we gather all of your feedback, and then we present that to the City Council that we'll get into a little bit later on how we do that. During March and April, staff works on the development of the proposed annual budget and the CIP. And then in May, we present that proposed budget and CIP to the City Council at their daytime budget workshop. And then any changes from the May workshop from the council is incorporated and presented to the council again in June when they adopt the annual budget and capital improvement program. And that's always the first meeting in June. And then throughout the year, finance and the various departments do ongoing analysis to make sure that our budget is still relevant, any adjustments that might be needed or taken to council, usually at the mid-year to make those adjustments. And we just analyze revenues and expenditures pretty much throughout the year. We utilize several different tools to develop the annual operating budget and the CIP. The first of which is in the middle here, which is the prior year carryover. So what that is any projects or programs that are started in the previous fiscal year that may not have been completed, we make sure that that budget is carried over into the next fiscal year so that we can bring those projects to completion. So that's sort of the first stepping stone. And then we look at all the various feedback we get through community satisfaction surveys. We typically do a community survey every couple of years, and we gain valuable feedback from the community members on what their priorities are, and we want to make sure that we're reflecting that in the budget appropriations. Board and commission feedback, same thing. And then we also have a variety of program and services master plans. And typically in those, they outline different capital projects or different programs that the community is wanting. And so we make sure that our CIP and our long-term plans reflect the appropriate resources so that we can deliver on those plans. And then finally, there's several city council policies that impact how we build the budget, some of which we'll go over tonight. But those are very key to knowing sort of the foundational rules of the budget, if you will. And we'll be meeting with the council on the 28th to review and affirm any council policies and see if they have any changes to that for this next go-around. So there's a few key deliverables throughout the budget process, and the first one is what we call the preliminary budget. This is an internal document that's developed by staff and presented to the city manager in the March and April timeframe, and it basically accumulates all of the departmental requests for operating and capital. And that's reviewed with the city manager, and then he makes his formal recommendations in the form of the proposed budget, and that's what's presented at the May budget workshop to the council. And that's where we will incorporate any feedback that we get from all of these engagement sessions with the boards and commissions. They'll be included in the proposed budget at that time, so the council does see the feedback we gained tonight. And then again, the final adoption is in June for the final operating budget and capital improvement program budget. So this is the, it's hard to read, it's not meant for you to read it, but just so you can see how we synthesize all of the information that we get from these budget engagement sessions. We will identify the key points from each commission, and then in the middle there, we summarize what comments are all in common. So last year, we saw that pretty much every commission and board wants to maintain public safety as a top priority. Address traffic congestion, affordable housing, and then do ongoing community engagement. So that was a common theme amongst all the different boards and commissions. So we made sure that we reflected that in our budget presentation to the council. And they get the feedback from each community, or each commission as well, from this exhibit. So I mentioned there's several policies that help us build the budget. One of them is what to do with available general fund balance. So to back up a step, in municipal finance, we follow what's called fund accounting. You can think of a fund as a separate bank account. We have the general fund, which is the city's primary operating fund, and then we have several other funds for various other restricted funds like gas tax, community development block grant, housing, things like that. We usually focus on the general fund because that is the largest. That's what funds public safety, public works, most of the city's operations. At the end of the year, we have an available fund balance, and that's like a savings account, but it's really considered one-time money. So we have these policies in place that allow for the appropriation of that money in this order of priority. And this was developed by the council, and it's memorialized in our budget policies. So the first of which is to spend the fund balance on public safety, equipment, and non-recurring programs. And again, because we consider this one-time money, we wouldn't want to use this money to fund staffing because that's an ongoing cost. So it's more geared towards one-time monies. Asset management reserves. So we have several funds set up as savings accounts to pay for the city's assets when they wear out. So for instance, we have several fleet vehicles. When we buy a fleet vehicle, we set money aside for, if we think that vehicle is going to last 10 years, we set aside money for 10 years so that when that fleet vehicle needs to be replaced, the money is already there. And we have that for fleet, for facilities, for technology, and we also have one for street maintenance. The third priority there is capital improvement projects. So the general fund can be a funding source for a CIP project. And then the fourth is the reduction of unfunded liabilities, and we'll actually get into that in a little bit, as well as the reduction or avoidance of city debt. So similarly, the council adopted appropriation guidelines for Measure S. Measure S is a 1 cent sales tax that the voters approved back in 2016 and became effective in 2017. And at that time, the council made up these priorities, again, public safety, asset management, capital projects, and then basically community services. So over time, Measure S has grown from what we originally received back in 2017. We estimated we would receive about 23 to 27,000, million, and we're up to receiving almost 40 million now. So it's been a very significant change to the city in our service delivery. We utilized Measure S to fund 11 police officers and the staffing at Fire Station 95, as well as it makes up the majority of the funding for our community services department, so all of our programs and events and parades and things. So it's a very significant source of revenue for us. And then as time goes on, as the cost of public safety and community services increases, there will be less available for capital projects. So the majority of Measure S right now is spent on capital projects, but over time, because public safety is the number one priority, the monies will shift, leaving less and less available for capital projects over time. So this is a new policy that the council just adopted in December, and it's what we call our debt liability pay down strategy. And basically the goal, as presented to the council, is to be debt-free within 7 years. And the council talked about this at their last budget workshop last May, that they were all in agreement that we should look at paying down the city's debt. We don't have a lot of debt. We have even less today than we had in December because of this plan. But those are our four categories of debt. So we had a loan on this building, a little over $12.9 million outstanding. We had a loan on the Margarita Recreation Center, that construction project that's going on right now, and we had pulled out a loan for that. And then we have both our unfunded liabilities related to pension, and then OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, or more commonly retiree health, which was a benefit that used to be provided to employees many, many years ago, back before 2005. But there is an unfunded liability out there for that. Annual payments are noted there. So what we've been able to do, in accordance with that budget policy, is utilize available fund balance to pay down these debts. And to date, we have paid down the $12.9 million from the Civic Center loan. We've paid off the MRC loan, and we've paid 7.25 of our pension liability. And we did that after the approval in December from the council. And we utilized a little over $20 million in available fund balance that we had in the general fund. Plus, we had funding in a pension trust, which is a third-party trust that was set up, I want to say back in 2017 or 2018. And what we did back then is we set aside funding, and then we have a policy that at the end of each year, we divert about $2 million, up to $2 million, into that trust. And the reason being is that the trust can invest in things that the city is not allowed to. So cities and counties are very restricted on what we can invest our funds in, so the yields are very low. But you can invest with third-party trustees, and they're still very conservative because it is government or tax dollars, public dollars. So it's conservative, but yet not as conservative as what we can invest in. So they're able to grow that money over time through investing. We currently have about $17 million in that trust, and this is sort of our pay-down plan that was approved by the council. So next year we plan to pull another $5 million from the trust, and combine that with 10.9 million of general fund to pay down the remainder of the OPEB liability and continue to pay down the pension liability. And then, all things being equal, if all of our assumptions come true, we'll be debt-free in 7 years. And that will save us over $30 million in interest alone just from CalPERS, the pension liability. A little over $2 million from the Civic Center loan and $1 million from the MRC loan. And annually, it saves us, you can see the dollars on the far right column there, anywhere between, we only had half a year's of savings this year, so 1.6 million, but it goes all the way up to over $8 million by the time we're paid off. And that money goes directly back into the operating budget and becomes available for programming to address things that have been identified in the QLMP. So the QLMP, the Quality of Life Master Plan, identifies several programs and projects that may not have a funding source identified. So this could potentially be a funding source for those future programs. And this is just a graphical show of the annual budgetary savings and then where we are to date. So just by paying off those items in December, we are at about $3 million of annual savings, and then those savings are then rolled into the fund balance to pay off the future items. So it's kind of a snowball effect. So after we have all those annual savings accumulated, we'll have enough to pay everything off by year 7, and then we'll yield those savings from that point forward. Okay, so these next few slides are our budget highlights. So what was presented to the council last week at our mid-year budget is a few slides regarding the general fund, and this slide here shows all of our major revenues in the general fund, and you can see the majority of it comes from sales tax. And our total revenue is looking like it'll be about $111.1.2 million this fiscal year. And the chart shows, the blue bars shows expenditures, and the black line shows the revenue. And because the revenue is above the blue line, that shows that we're structurally balanced. We do not have a structural deficit or anything like that this year or the next 5 years. So fiscally, we are still very strong and intend to be for the next several years. And then this is a chart showing our general fund expenditures. So as I mentioned, the general fund funds public safety. Little over half of the general fund is dedicated to police and fire. And then we have about 20% dedicated to public works. And that includes staffing as well as a lot of contractual services that Public Works pays for. Community development is funded by the general fund, as well as general administration. So total expenditures about $93 million. And then this is the slide that accumulates the fund balance. So once you have revenues higher than expenditures, that savings falls to fund balance. Our fund balance is projected to be $37.1 million at the end of this fiscal year. And of that $37 million, we have a policy where we set aside 20% of the operating expenditures into what we call the Reserve for Economic Uncertainty, and that's funded at $18.6 million. And then we have a secondary reserve at $4.6 million, and that is calculated as 5% of our operating expenditures. So combined, we have about 25% in reserves. Very healthy reserve. Luckily, we have never had to tap into our reserves, even through the Great Recession or through COVID. We've been able to balance our budgets without the utilization of reserves. And that leaves available fund balance of $13 million. And that, as you saw from the slides previously, a portion of that will be utilized to pay down debt. The cool thing on this slide is to see that the blue bars represent the fund balance, the black line represents our funded reserves, and then the yellow diamond is our desired level reserves. So throughout our 5-year program, we are fully funded in our reserves, and then we have excess fund balance over and above our reserves as well. Even with the debt paydown strategy, we still structured it so that we have a little bit of cushion in the event of an economic downturn. So the CIP, we have a very large CIP for a city our size, a little over, 106 projects a little over $801 million in total costs. $518 million of that has yet to be spent. So that's basically our budgets for the next 5 years to complete all 106 projects. We break out the CIP into 4 categories. Circulation is the largest, and then we have infrastructure projects, parks and recs, and then SARTA, or housing is what SARTA is. So for circulation projects, we have 31 separate projects totaling $625 million. These are the big ones, so I'm sure you're mostly familiar with these. But we have the French Valley Parkway that we just had the ribbon cutting on last week. I think that was last week. So that'll be getting started here very soon. In, I believe, April is when they plan to start that project. Then we have the Murrieta Creek Bridge at Overland, and that is scheduled to start in 2025, depending on the receipt of grant monies that they're going after. The Nicholas Road Extension, that's a large project. We're still accumulating the funding for that, and a large portion of that will be paid by a developer in the future. The pavement rehab projects, that money is being spent on the Meadowview and Paloma del Sol neighborhoods. Those are underway, and then there's a program to spend it on Yanez, Solano, Nicholas Road, and Winchester in May. And then the I-15 congestion relief, that's the building of the auxiliary lane between northbound 15 Temecula Parkway up to Rancho Cal, and that should start in the summer of 2023. And then the infrastructure projects, we have 52 separate projects totaling $112 million. The Margarita Rec Center, which is currently underway, that's projected to be completed around September timeframe. The CRC renovation is also underway, expected to be complete in April. And then the Santa Gertrudis Creek Pedestrian Trail, that was just finished. They had the grand opening for that not too long ago in October. And then the fiber optic communication system upgrade, that's completed, but it's currently in a testing phase. So those are the major infrastructure projects. Then we have Parks and Recs projects, the splash pad and shade structures at the CRC, that's still in design. It's about 90% designed. And then pickleball courts is still in discussions. They had conceptual design evaluated by the subcommittee last month, so that'll be moving forward here shortly. The Murrieta Creek project, or Murrieta Creek Regional Sports Park project, that's a future project placeholder. We're trying to obtain some match funding and federal funding to get that sports park going. The skate park is in the gathering feedback stage, as well as the hockey rink. They're doing community outreach and gathering feedback before we get going on those 2 projects. And then housing, we have a total of 3 housing projects, and the housing projects utilize the former redevelopment agency bond proceeds. So it's a limited amount of money, but they have been able to gather these 3 projects going on. So Las Haciendas, that's actually in construction now. That's a 77-unit multifamily development located in Uptown Temecula. And then Vine Creek, which is an affordable housing project with 60 units. I believe they've secured all of their funding. That hasn't quite started yet, but the city will be contributing $6.7 million towards that project. And then there's a project on the books for Habitat for Humanity to build 6 units for affordable workforce housing, and these units will be for sale as opposed to for rent, like the other projects are. So that is the CIP, and just to finish off here, we've got, the city has about 196 full-time equivalent authorized positions. That does not include police and fire because they are provided through the contract. So we have 71 contract fire employees and 136 contract police employees. And then we also employ several part-time, or what we call project employees, that serve as lifeguards and recreation assistants and specified project help that comes in typically as part-time. So overall, our headcount has remained relatively flat over the last several years. It's evaluated by the city manager on a case-by-case situation, and we will increase headcount as a business need arises, as it has in the last couple of years, primarily with the growth of our CIP and our overall budget. But it's still relatively lean compared to cities our size, and that, I believe, concludes all the slides. And so we circle back to the discussion questions, which, again, as a commissioner, do you feel that the city's investment of financial resources is in line with community priorities? And then if so, what are the programs and projects that you believe are most beneficial? And then if not, how could the city better align its resources to community needs? So I will turn it over to you for discussion or answer any questions that you might have on the presentation.
Start over here.
This is my second time going through one of your presentations, and I was very impressed with the presentation and the city's finances last time, and I'm very impressed again. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
We have in front of us, too, the Quality of Life Master Plan. When you talk about the CIP projects that are in the budget that you presented, did this document come into play there, or was it not available yet?
The existing, for the current CIP budget, it was the former QLMP, because that one was in progress of being finished. Every single CIP project has an identified goal and core value that ties back to the QLMP. So every single city project and every performance measure that operating departments track ties back to the QLMP. So as we go through the next budget cycle, we will utilize the new QLMP and tie that back into those now 7 core values, because we have the new equity core value. So all of those do tie back and have a direct link back to the core values.
Okay, so, but just to be clear, the direct tie-in won't be till the next CIP
Correct.
project. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering with the elevated costs of concrete and asphalt, not to mention the limited or at least wildly inconsistent availability of supply, do we anticipate any challenges or budgetary shortfalls for our pavement maintenance programs?
The CIP team did review their project projections, and we did make several adjustments to projects at the mid-year. We anticipate making more in the next CIP update because of the rising cost of supplies and materials and everything. So they are evaluating that now. So the ones that are getting started this year, we've made those adjustments already in the mid-year.
Okay, and we were able to do that, I'm assuming, because of our sort of asset management mindset and those reserves?
For the most part, it came from additional revenue that we're anticipating. So we work with a consultant team to help us evaluate sales tax and Measure S, and they're utilized statewide, so they're really in tune with what's going on with economic trends. So both of their projections, as well as our own internal projections, show that we'll be bringing in about $2 million more of sales tax and $2 million more of Measure S. So that did give us a little bit more funding to allocate for these projects that are seeing higher costs.
Yeah, that's excellent. It seems like every time you're here, you have good news for us. So, a couple other comments, feedback I had. I wanted to commend you and the council on the debt and liability paydown strategy. I think that's brilliant, and as you mentioned, that's really going to be key in freeing up funding for some of those big one-time projects in the new Quality of Life Master Plan. And at the same time that we're paying down our pension obligations and taking on the new QLMP and undertaking the largest capital improvement program in the history of the city, I also wanted to voice my support for any necessary increase in city staffing levels that might come along with that. I know it's the city manager's prerogative, and
Right.
We trust him with those decisions, but I would definitely be in support of that. I see the city not just as a steward of our public assets, but also, maybe more importantly, it's a service-oriented organization where our workforce really is our most valuable resource. And so, and that's true whether that's contracted public safety or full-time city staff, full-time equivalents. In my opinion, there's no greater force multiplier for our tax dollars than our public employees here. I think they've proven that over the years. So I guess if I could just focus that into a single bullet point of feedback for you would be that I would hope to see actually some healthy growth in city staffing levels modeled into the future in the same way and for some of the same reasons that we budget for growth in our public safety personnel.
Thank you.
So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for a very informative report.
Thank you.
All I can say is, wow. I mean, it's just amazing how well the revenues for the city are managed. It's incredible. I think you've hit all the right spots to me. Public safety, police and fire are the two big issues here. There is a weak link in our public safety program that would require money to fix and some work with negotiation with Riverside County. When I worked at LA County, West Hollywood Sheriff's Station, all the calls for dispatch for that contracted city went to that station. And the problem is that I've had the need to call 911 on 3 occasions for health issues here. One was for a massive heart attack. And the lines were all busy because all 911 calls go to one call center in Paris for our public services. And the county isn't funding sufficient numbers of dispatchers, but we're paying top dollar for police and fire and have excellent coverage. But this most recent one, it took 5 minutes for someone from dispatch to call me back. And, if someone's having a heart attack or a stroke, that's vital time. So I think it would be nice if this city investigated developing our own 911 call center so that we can get our officers and fire personnel there much quicker.
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with Commissioner Maddox. I think the pay-down strategy is brilliant. It really is. Can't say enough about that. I know a lot of individual citizens would like to be able to do what you're doing for the city, so really impressive. You mentioned several times the QLMP. We recently also had a report on the local hazard mitigation plan, the LHMP. Is there any alignment yet of the budget with LHMP priorities and potential funding needs?
I'm sure that there is, but I am definitely not the expert there, so I can't really comment on that. I don't know if you all can provide insight to that.
Actually, in talking with Mike Alford, I mean, we continue in Public Works, look for grants for him. We send those over, and he obviously monitors it as well. So in conjunction with the two, we are actively searching for funding.
Very good. Yeah, the reason I ask, I always go back to, and Mr. Alford presented, one of the things in LHMP is the cyber threat, which is very real to the city. And when you're a healthy financial city, you become more of a target for people that want to hold you ransom. So I think in alignment with our top-notch financial health, we should have top-notch IT protections in place to mitigate that specific hazard. Yeah. And I think that should be funded through the city.
We do have, with that in particular, we do have, I want to say it's $1 million, $1.2 million budgeted in the IT department to do a upgrade of our system and then a duplication of our system in the event of a catastrophic failure or an event where we cannot access our data system here. It'll be housed off-site in a secure location, so we'll have that duplication of our system.
Very good. Yeah,
So
I know.
that is being worked on.
Yeah, I know you're coming to all the commissions. I would love if we heard you've talked to Mr. Alford and he's happy too. So
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that. The other thing, to answer your question, I do believe the city investments are in line with community priorities, at least that we deal with in the Public Traffic Safety Commission. The final thing that I would ask is, you know, we hear the pain points from the traffic mostly on this commission. And things like, you know, over on, I'll give an example, over on Butterfield Stage, we have a place where 2 lanes pinch down to 1 to then immediately go back to 2. That's a pain point for a lot of people trying to go through that. I go through it several times a week myself. But for a lot of these places in the city where we know an infrastructure project is coming and it's on the books and we're planning it and we're saying a developer is going to pay for that. If we have really high confidence that a developer will pay for that, is there an opportunity to perhaps advance funding when we have that high confidence to eliminate the pain now and then have the developer reimburse us for what we've spent on those projects?
Yeah, we've been in discussion with the city attorney on that because there is a specific way you have to go about in adopting a resolution to be able to set up those types of cost reimbursement agreements, because essentially what you're doing is putting a lien on the property. And what you're saying is that this property will be obligated to reimburse the city at some point. So we have talked to the city attorney. That is something that we are investigating because we do see some value. There are some parcels around here that could definitely benefit from a road widening, but we don't know when they're going to develop. So Pat and I are working on that.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I just, you know, we hear that we have high confidence that a developer will pay for something. If we're financially healthy and we can lean forward in those cases, that's great.
Yeah, it just depends if the council has the appetite to put these types of liens on properties and property owners and have them have those obligations, because it would affect maybe sale of properties and such. So we're being very careful in kind of exploring that avenue, but it's a good option, yeah.
All I had, Skip.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer, thank you very much for a very thorough presentation. And I have to say that this would not happen if you and your staff weren't keeping us out of the red. I'm not naive to think that everyone else in city government is doing all of this work, and then, you know, you're the one that's telling people, you can't do that. You can't do that. We have to stay here. So kudos to you and your staff.
Thank you.
For keeping us where we are. As you know, the city has always been, their budget has always been, you know, above. We've always stayed in the black, if they still call it that anymore, but kudos to all of you. And as far as the projects, I think, you know, obviously public safety, and that's our gamut here, but the infrastructure, which is also that we're working on. So everything that you've put out there is right in line to what we're trying to do as a city to move forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other
Anyone
questions?
else? You first.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is number 3, Pujol Street and Main Street stop control analysis. Who's going to handle that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Good evening. This presentation is in regards to an all-way stop controls analysis at the intersection of Pujol Street and Main Street. In the past, over the past several years, we've received several residential complaints and concern regarding excessive speeding and lack of a pedestrian crossing on Pujol Street near Main Street. And I think back in around 2021, Eric, you may be able to say this, I think we actually installed an all-way stop at Pujol and First as part of a, so this is kind of a continuation of that complaint. Based on these requests, we did a little field review, and then staff reviewed the corridor and the intersection, and we determined we should look at this as a potential all-way stop, and that's what we'll be displaying tonight. So a little bit of background on these roads. Pujol Street is a 40-foot wide local residential roadway. Although it's kind of a little bit of more of a residential collector, there's a lot of housing on there, and there's actually a decent amount of traffic with 4,100 ADT on that road. I think some people may use it as a little bit of a bypass to avoid the Old Town area, specifically at night. Speeds, 85th speed, there's around 26 miles per hour, and there's class 3 bike sharrows on that road. Main Street is a 42-foot wide collector with a posted speed of 25. Based on streetlight data, we got a ADT of 500. It seemed a little low. We couldn't confirm that in time, but it seemed a little low, but it maybe does make sense. Not too many people use that roadway. And also there's class 3 bike sharrows on that road. So as part of our stop controls analysis, we collected traffic volume data, reviewed collision history, evaluated site distance, and then compared the overall multi-way stop warrant analysis for the intersection. As mentioned, we collected streetlight data over a 3-month period, and we plugged that into our multi-way stop volume analysis to help determine if it was justified. We also looked at collision history. There's only been 1 accident over the past 3 years at that intersection. We evaluated site distance. There's no site distance issues here. The only issue that there may be is with cars parking along the curb line there. And it should be noted that we should be painting the curb red on the southeast curb in order to prevent line of sight restrictions. That's one thing we noticed while we're out there. So no matter what we decide here on an all-way stop, that should be occurring. So as mentioned, we performed this multi-way stop warrant analysis using the multi-way stop sign policy for residential streets. This policy requires a view of warrants that must be satisfied in order to justify an all-way stop. We reviewed minimum traffic volumes, collision history, and roadway characteristics. The results of the analysis indicate that the intersection does not meet the minimum warrants based mainly on the traffic volumes and the collision history. So based on that data, it's not justified. However, the policy does provide flexibility to consider other roadway characteristics and site conditions to determine if an all-way is still justified. And some of the things we consider that make us believe that a multi-way stop here isn't actually a good idea is we got higher ADTs on Pujol Street, typically over 2,000. You can start to consider, hey, maybe there's enough traffic here. The vehicle to ped conflicts to activity centers. This leads to the heart of the downtown area. There's quite a few residents on that road, and the people on the west side, actually, it's hard to get across that street. And then there's no controlled crosswalk within 600 feet of this intersection. So if you did want to go across and you wanted to be considered safe, you'd have to go 600 feet in either direction. And I don't think too many people would do that if they wanted to go down Main Street. They would just jaywalk across that street. So considering all that, we feel like a stop sign is justified. And I kind of showed on this map here the items I just talked about and a few other things. So it shows and actually, I probably need to go back, but it shows some activity centers of Main Street and Pujol. We have the Vine Creek apartments coming in. We have a church. We have a future kind of Paseo area as part of the Altair project. And we have the Marietta Creek Trail. For any of these residents to access this, they kind of have to go out of their way in order to get to this area. And this just seems like a logical spot to have a nice, controlled, safe pedestrian crossing. So an all-way stop also fits the residential nature of this area. If I go back to the slides, you can see in red all the stop signs down on Old Town Front Street. Down on First and Pujol, you got a stop sign, and then you got at Felix Valdez, you have a side street stop for Pujol. So it fits the nature of this roadway, and we don't think it'll be a hindrance to operations of this road. This slide shows a conceptual crosswalk that we think will be what we would be implementing. There is no cost to perform this work because we're actually going to put the responsibility on the Vine Creek apartment project that is nearly approved and expected to start construction, we don't know, but near future, very near future. Staff's recommendation for the commission is to recommend the city council adopt a resolution establishing multi-way stop controls at the intersection of Pujol and Main Street. In addition, we'd like also to direct staff to implement pedestrian crosswalk striping at the intersection of Pujol Main. Sorry, and that concludes this presentation. I can open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? We'll start on this end.
Yeah.
Jer.
So I read this report, I thought this was really good work. And I noticed what you mentioned on the drawing. This is not really a cut-through stop sign, which is mostly what we're asked for because of all the stop signs on Front Street, right? So it's not like a cut-through problem, but we're doing this mostly to support the crosswalk as a service to the residents on that side, which will be growing with Vine Creek, and access to the new trails that we've just opened. So I thought this was, really good, and the pedestrian crosswalks are so far away. I just think this is the reason we go against the warrant and do something. This is the perfect example of this. So I like the recommendation by staff. I think this is a really good analysis.
Thank you.
I support both recommendations.
Yeah, I went back and looked at our 2021 project on Pujol and First, and we measured close to 200 ADT pedestrians and bicycles on there. I was wondering if we had any kind of count or measurement on that more recently.
We did not do any new counts on that, and unfortunately, Streetlight Data doesn't measure that. We don't pay for that much more expensive module,
Right.
but we could look into the future for that.
I can imagine that would be difficult. No, I appreciate that, though, and I appreciate the look at the future development projects coming in there. I did look at some other data related to the bus routes, not a perfect proxy for pedestrian ADT, but maybe provide some context. At the RTA board meeting earlier today, actually, they reported on their ridership levels for the month of January. It's at 3,400 for just that Route 24, which stops like right on the corner there.
Oh.
So I guess roughly over 100 a day. So I thought that was interesting, and what really stood out to me from that too is that that's a 19% increase over the previous year, 30% increase over 2 years. They're not back up to their pre-pandemic levels, but a clear trend there. So, my thought would be that we would probably not only anticipate pedestrian traffic to increase due to the future development, but there's maybe some indication there that it's increasing right now, in part due to the ridership rebound there, and also probably owing to what Commissioner Richardson mentioned as well, the city pedestrian-friendly infrastructure that was opened up recently. So looks like Old Town is really heading in that way towards being a more walkable district, and I think the staff recommendation here is pretty much in step with that. So.
Yeah, just real quick, looking at the data you provided with the traffic in the area and the traffic on Main Street, just based on my experience, I would guess that that's probably not inaccurate. I think that Pujol Street is primarily used as a bypass. Yeah. So even though this is directed at pedestrian safety, and I think will be instrumental in that, I think it'll also do a lot of work to reduce the speeds on Pujol Street, making it safer for the residents who live there. So I fully support this.
Great.
My only comment would be, are we waiting for the developer to do this, or can we do it ahead of time? Or when is the developer anticipated to complete this?
I think we're going to wait for the developer to do this because there's actually some major storm drain improvements that need to be done. And so in conjunction with that, we do all the construction at the same time.
Okay. What's the time frame on something like that?
Well, they've already been issued their grading permits. They are working on the design of this. So we wanted to bring it here first so that they could implement it into their design. So now they'll submit street improvement plans. We'll plan check them, traffic will look at them, and then after they're approved, then hopefully they'll be going forward. I would say the one challenge with the Vine Creek Apartments is it is affordable housing. And the challenge with that is that they have certain milestones and dates that they have to hit in order to get their funding. So it seems like it's always going to be this 3-month work, and then stop in 3, kind of the way the Las Haciendas has done. So, right. But they are planning on pooling or starting the grading because they already have the permit probably within the next 8 weeks.
Okay.
They'll start the grading.
Good. Thank you. I think it's great. When I went and visited the area, it was interesting to see that parking lot that's coming out on the other side, on the west side, has a stop sign. And it's normal that when you're coming out of a drive, you would stop automatically, but it's perfect place for one, and it is a pass-through because I use it often when I don't want to go through Old Town. Okay, do I get a motion? Have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we make the recommendations as written in the agenda. Approve resolution establishing multi-way stop controls and adding the striped pedestrian crosswalks.
I'll second.
I got a second.
Ackerman,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Maddox,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Sullivan.
Aye.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was perfect. Okay, next on the agenda, division report, police chiefs and CHP.
Good evening, and as always, thanks for having me here. Always nice to be here and kind of
Thanks
keep you
for
up to
coming.
date with what's happening with the CHP here in Temecula. So for services provided, 27 child safety seats installed and 12 traffic safety presentations, which include Age Well, Drive Smart, Start Smart, and Distracted Driver presentations. For enforcement activity, staying fairly average, 762 citations issued, 1,319 total enforcement contacts. We had an enforcement detail where all of our motors, we have 6 motors and a motor sergeant, so we had all of them out there on one day on the through school zones and unincorporated areas, especially around French Valley. We had 76 primary collision factor citations issued and 15 verbal warnings. Our next detail like that, our enforcement detail, will be February 22nd, which just happened. And then on March 13th, we're working on a multi-area enforcement detail, which will be on the 15 freeway, and the idea is to go all the way from San Diego all the way up through Riverside. So we'll have San Diego CHP, Oceanside CHP, Temecula CHP, and then hopefully even Riverside CHP involved in that. What's that? Yeah. So our DUI arrests, fairly well, 41 DUI arrests, and as always, trying to keep our crashes, more arrests, or trying to get them before they're crashing. So we had 20 crashes that were DUI involved, 41 arrests total. As far as our traffic collisions, stayed fairly average. Have been averaging since I've been in Temecula about 150 traffic collisions a month. So we had a total of 163 in January. 95 were non-injury, 67 injury, 1 was a fatality, and so far 1 fatality year to date. And the next slide is our fatality. It was on the transition road from southbound 215 to southbound 15. It was a solo vehicle DUI involved in unrestrained passengers. And that concludes my report. Any questions? All right, thank you.
I have one. You're doing all of this, and it all looks good, but what's your staffing like?
Staffing, yeah, I was actually going to hit on that. So I actually got 2 new officers that just started in February 1st, so it's not much, but I'll take it. And then I had 3 retire last year, and I'm getting 2 more in April 1st. So we'll still be down. I'll be about 37 officers. I should be at 47, so by that time I should be 37. I still have some injuries to contend with, but hey, it's for the first time in 3 years that I've been in this office now, it's looking a little bit positive, so I'm happy about it.
Well, they're doing a great job, and it's to your leadership, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next, fire.
Evening. Thank you for having me here. So for calls within the city of Temecula for the fire department, in total we've ran 828 calls varying from different types, with the most being our medical emergencies, as you can see on the slide, and next being our false alarms, and then our top third one, rounding it out as traffic collisions. Next slide. For the review and plans for the city, we've had 529 plan reviews, construction inspections 359, annual inspections are, 395, and then our annual inspections were 359 so far, and public encounter inquiries are 27. So as you can see, our numbers are still up there, still lots of inspections going on, staying consistent, running calls with all the stations. End of report. Do you have any questions?
All right, thank you for being here. I'd like to ask, I know this is your first meeting here, but last year it was requested that the report get more in detail on breaking down the response times and the performance of our units here in the city. We still haven't seen that, and now I've got, again, this quality of life master plan in front of me. Our number one priority is a safe and prepared community, and the measurements that we're asking to meet are based on response time. So I'm going to ask again that this report breaks down response times. We've heard it from Commissioner Sullivan that our alarm handling times are not where they should be. But as I look at this report, it's saying that 90% of the time we have effective fire protection on scene in 5 minutes. But as a commissioner here for a little more than a year, I've never seen data related to that. So I would like to start to see that in the reports, a breakdown of how our units here in the city of Temecula are responding to incidents. Additionally, if it's possible to put the first slide of the presentation back up there. So this slide shows us the geographic locations of all of our stations throughout the city. But having some knowledge of the fire department here in Temecula, I know that we have only one truck in the city, one specialized piece of equipment that we've funded, and it's located in one of the most outlying stations. Well, we have a single station in the center of the city that seems like it'd be a logical place to allow that specialized piece of equipment. So as someone who lives on the exact opposite side of town, I know that it would make more sense to me as a citizen to have that piece of equipment, again, more centrally located, able to respond throughout the city of Temecula more appropriately. So most importantly, though, I would ask that future presentations dive into the response times, help meet our objective of our alarm handling time so we can have better understanding moving forward with that. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. Director report.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. So for this week, I did note all of your responses. I know Jennifer Hennessy, our Finance Director, was noting them down, but I will also bring those to Pat. And so I know that there were a few that he would directly want to know about. But he also wanted to mention that we had a great I-15 Phase 2, turnout. Glad for those of you that were able to make it. It was a really great time. We had a much more attendance than we thought we were going to have on a dreary day. So we are looking forward to kicking off in April. They're doing their mobilization right now, getting their office staff and getting, their REs out here and everything. So we'll keep you apprised of that project as it goes along over the next couple of years. And then lastly, really, we've just been watching the storm and seeing the impact to our streets. The one thing that we did do, just so you're aware, is that we closed down the new Santa Gertrudis Trail undercrossings just because they were in the creek areas. So we did gate those off, our Public Works Department. So that way we, from a safety standpoint, we weren't sure how big the storm would be, but we certainly don't want people down there. And so we did gate those off in case you were wondering. And that will conclude my report tonight.
Great, thank you. Commissioner reports. Eric? Nothing?
I just want to kind of piggyback on Commissioner Ackerman's comments with fire regarding our Riverside County sheriffs. At the same time that the request was made for detailed response times and stuff, the commission asked for breakdown of crimes by reporting districts, because it's the only way we can tell, are we having sufficient utilization of officers in the right areas? And are there crime trends peaking in areas that we can then ask the department what they're doing to address it? Which leads me to my second issue, and that is we haven't had a member from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department here in probably 4, maybe 5 months. Do we think, well, let me rephrase that, because I don't want to shoot the messenger, Ron. Can you check with Patrick and see if he can speak with both elected and city manager about supporting our request that they attend and provide these reports?
Yes, I'll pass along that message.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Just say I appreciate Commissioner Ackerman's request for the response data. That is our duty here to make sure that that specific thing here is met. We don't mention it to beat up on fire, but it should be, that sentence should end with, so we can get the help we need if we need help. We all want to work together as one team to get those response times to the goal line. So is that correct? Yeah, I think so.
100%.
Yeah, so I do feel like that's something that we can work together as a whole PTSC plus here to make happen. That's all I wanted to add.
Very good. The only thing I have is Commissioner Maddox and myself are going to be meeting with Councilwoman Alexander on Tuesday. So we will report back on our meeting with her. Other than that, there is nothing else. I guess we can adjourn for the evening until March 20, somebody help me here, 23rd.
Could I bring up, that one is a joint meeting with the city council, the March meeting. So that will be not here, it'll be with council. And I don't think we were able to get that into the agenda report. So your next meeting as a commission will be in April, but we'll keep you apprised on the date of the council meeting, which will probably be the 28th. Okay? Mm-hmm.